announcement has been made. The rosters, at least half of them, have been revealed, and we know the starting goaltenders, or the three goaltenders, named to a few different Olympic rosters for Milan Cortina. This is InGoal Radio, the podcast, presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports Langley, thehockeyshop.com. Darren Millard, along with Kevin Woodley. David Hutchison is on assignment somewhere around Western Canada. Can't reveal the exact location, but I'm going to nail it down to someplace wintry and cold. That's as far as I'll go on it.
So in other words, he's going east of Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere wintry and cold between the Rocky Mountains and Thunder Bay. That's as close as I'm going to lock it in, because we protect his privacy. We're good that way. This is a fun time of the year. We got some cool announcements. One being the review of the Alpha Surge line from Warrior Hockey and the contract extension of Devin Cooley. We'll get to both those. But the Olympic rosters have been revealed. And in particular, we were wondering what Finland would do, what Sweden would do, Team Canada, which direction they would go in. USA was a foregone conclusion. But any surprises that you saw pop up?
Only that my phone didn't ring, buddy.
That would have been a surprise.
That would have been a surprise, I guess. A little surprised to hear that neither did Mackenzie Blackwoods. Like, not even, you're next on the list if someone gets hurt, given the number of injuries we've seen in goal. He's a guy that, when I look at the numbers this year, I might have tried to find a way onto the roster for Canada, and yet I've said that, and since I've said that, he's out of the lineup again with another injury. So maybe that's part of the thinking there. Guys that, Darcy Kemper stays healthy with the Los Angeles Kings, and also over the past 2 years has been exceptional. For a little bit of a dip right now.
Won a Stanley Cup too, right?
Won a Stanley Cup. I look back at that Stanley Cup year and the statistics.
Everybody says
for
that.
For the goaltenders, man, there aren't many cups handed out with goalie stats like that. That's just the truth. And I think from the eye injury on that year, he wasn't the same guy. He has been that guy in LA. He was worthy. We talked about how everybody thinks the Kings are an easy environment for goaltenders. They took a step back defensively last year, and he was full value for that Vezina nod. So combination of that and this year, I get it. Binnington, obviously, we've seen the struggles, but we said it last week. Jordan Binnington with a chip on his shoulder. What's he done since the announcement? We start with the shutout right away?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not even the starter right now on his own team.
Game 2 after the announcement.
Okay, right. You're right. He got shelled by the Colorado Avalanche in the first game. Game 2 shutout. His numbers actually over the past month are starting to tick up relative to a pretty bad defensive environment. So that's positive. And then Logan Thompson was a no-brainer to me, frankly. If they had done anything, if they were to do anything but win gold and he wasn't on the team, we'd have a goaltending symposium to investigate it. Like, he's been that good for the last couple of years for the Washington Capitals, and he's full value. So no surprises there. Maybe the Blackwood thing, but no shocks there.
Do you want to go down the path of who each federation, or the big four, number one goaltenders are?
Sure. It's Binnington for Canada, no? Like you're not...
Logan Thompson. I think Logan Thompson will be there at number one.
As much as Binnington has fallen off a cliff this year statistically, if he climbs back out of it in the next couple of months at all, aren't you bringing him because of what he did at the Four Nations, and don't you need to give him that first shot at retaining that? I'm not saying that's how I'd go necessarily.
He'd have to put together a pretty good stretch here in the final 3 weeks of January.
But if you were judging him based on what he's done this season, you wouldn't have him on the team. So if you've got him on the team, it's because you think he can be your starter, no?
I think the lack of options is probably why he's there.
Okay, well, I mean, like I said, I can find a pretty good option in Mackenzie Blackwood, Scott Wedgwood. Like, there's some other guys. We talked about Jake Allen that have had good statistical seasons. At the end of the day, Binnington and Kemper have a pedigree, right? So
we disagree there. What Team USA? Is it Connor Hellebuck?
Yeah, it's Connor Hellebuck. I think it would be his job to lose. I think people, I know that things have not gone well in Winnipeg, obviously, this year. Their defensive play, which was so good last year, has completely evaporated. And yet Hellebuck, since coming back from the knee injury, is still above expected. He went into that knee surgery as one of the best goalies in the NHL relative to environment. Going into the surgery, he was actually better statistically than he was last year when he won the Hart and the Vezina. So I think it's his job to lose. He'll get first dibs. I got to say, though, because this is worth noting, After a couple years where we talked a lot about a lot of Jake Ottinger's numbers being a product of the environment defensively, he is outplaying the environment in Dallas by a significant margin this year. Like, he is performing at a higher level than he has in the past couple of years. And as much as it's gotten attention statistically, guys like Steven Valiquette have pointed out, like, hey, like, relative to environment for 3 years, he's basically been league average. Like, the reputation didn't necessarily match the results. The results have caught up to the reputation. Like, Jake Ottinger looks great. He's playing great. The numbers back it up. If anybody's going to push right now, as good as Jeremy Swayman can be too, I think Ottinger's setting himself up to at least be a part of that conversation in the American net.
Sweden is forced to pass over a Vezina Trophy winner in Linus Ullmark, who is their starter at the Olympic Winter Games.
Quietly, and nobody's really noticed it yet, but for the last couple of weeks, Jacob Markstrom's numbers have ticked up significantly, but I still think it's going to be Jonas Gustafsson. Just the amount of experience
and all
he has.
NHL tandem there, like a team tandem.
Gus and Wallstead, yeah, and full value to Wallstead, whose numbers remain off the charts good in a somewhat favorable environment in Minnesota. I think Gustafsson's got a larger track record and more experience, and so that. And over the past month or so, those numbers have started to level off between him and Wallstead. That's my hunch. I don't know, but my guess would be Gustafsson gets the first dibs.
And Finland?
Saros has also had an exceptional sort of bounce back here. As Nashville has gotten better and climbed back into the race, a large part of it has been UC Saros. So I would suspect that he gets first shot, although Alex Lyon, who we're going to talk about in our Pro Reads presented by Vizual Edge a little later on in the show, as this week's guest in that segment, as much as he started the run with Buffalo, when UPL got into the net, he's been a big part of it, and his game has upticked up until, when they were going for the 11th straight win, there were a couple that went through him, and they couldn't extend it to 11, but up to that point, he'd been really good, and his game had been trending in the right spot. I still think it's Saros, and listen, Kevin Lankinen for the past 3, 4, maybe even 5 starts has once again started to look like the guy the Canucks had at the start of last season. He hasn't. We talked about this last week. He is 17 for 17 in shootouts, has not given up a goal. And his game overall is just really trending in a nice direction.
So you still wanted to go to a shootout in Milan and put him in?
I do. Maybe I do. Maybe that's just the goalie geek in me. I did ask him that question. I was asked to ask him that question, actually. And obviously too soon to think about that. I don't even know if that's something any team would consider. But when you look at his numbers, man, like .889 leads the NHL all time in shootout save percentage, and 17 straight this year. I'm not sure anybody would put a goalie in cold after that much hockey's been played and they haven't been a part of it. But if you're ever going to make a case, I think Kevin Lankinen might be it.
Ray Shero, way back when, his dad, Fred, had an idea of a bullpen-like situation for goaltenders in the hallway at rinks, where goaltenders could warm up and get ready for games. That was Fred, coach of the Philadelphia Flyers and New York Rangers, had that idea. I think we need it.
All we need is NHL Sense Arena. I mean, I'll lend Lanks my headset while he's over in Italy, because we've seen guys use it in the intermissions and as part of their warm up. So you just set it to shootout mode. You can handle it, and you'll be fine.
Okay, Germany hasn't at the time of this recording released their roster.
Well, but Philip Grubauer,
he is on a heater, isn't he?
Yeah, and listen, like, not to pat our backs too hard, but we called this, right? And full credit to Valiquette's numbers over at Clearsight Analytics. I mentioned him in the Ottinger discussion. Like, the numbers there pointed to this coming. As much as last year was a disappointment for Philip Grubauer, he ends up clearing waivers and going to the American Hockey League. Once he got back, he was a different goalie. His numbers were uptick huge. Seattle brought in Colin Zulianello, brought him up from Coachella Valley, where he'd worked with Grubauer. They just seemed to have a really great working relationship, and he has basically picked up where he left off. Since the injury to Matt Murray and they've been in a more traditional 2-goalie setup, he's been sensational. Like, top 10 numbers in the entire National Hockey
do you think
League.
the 2-goalie thing has something to do with it?
I'm like, much like the shootout thing, and I know everybody says 3 goalies doesn't work, and I'm usually an advocate for, you can make it work, and you can use it. You can use it to get rest. Like, Joey Decord was getting so much rest earlier. He wasn't having to dress when he wasn't starting. There were a lot of positives there. the way they were managing them in practice, like tons of positives. But it might have been a little bit of overthinking because I don't know if it's a coincidence that they've gotten the best out of Grubauer since it ended.
Unless one guy practices by himself every day. The goalies out there want their own net. And the third goalie whoever's not in the net ends up getting in the way. The players don't like it. The goalies don't like it. The goalie coach doesn't like it. The coaches don't like it. It doesn't work. The third guy, whoever that third guy is that particular day, has to practice by himself.
So, in other words, we need the practice goalies so that all the benefits of having an extra goalie, which are real, can be done without all those issues.
Because the practice goalie doesn't have to practice if you don't need him.
He can wait in the bullpen with his NHL Sense Arena on until somebody gets off the ice,
or his Fred Shero. Bullpen. Can you imagine building that thing behind? Like, space is so limited already. What that thing would look like.
Hey, we don't even have a media room on the rink, on the ice level at Rogers Arena. I don't think they're going to be able to squeeze in a bullpen for the practice goalies.
Devin Cooley gets a contract extension with the Calgary Flames. That's a great story.
And Mackenzie Skapski might get a watch, a Rolex to boot. I'm not sure
if you saw that. Why would he get a watch?
Well, because our friend Devin Cooley basically thanked Mackenzie for saving his career, in his words. The transformation that he made in the American Hockey League last year, I guess somewhere along the way, he said, if I make it back up and I make it in the NHL, you're getting a Rolex. So he signed a 2-year contract extension to stay in the NHL. I think that Skapski, who I will see later this week, let me just say I'm going to be paying close attention to what's on his wrist, see if they pulled that off yet. It was a great story by Eric Francis sort of outlining that relationship, and that was a big part of it. Some jokes back and forth about just how nice a Rolex it might be. Listen, this is a great story. One of my favorites in terms of, like, Cooley's outspoken and we all know the quote and the t-shirts and the pet rabbit, but this is a guy who never gave up in terms of being willing to try new things and look at his game in different ways. Like the ultimate late bloomer, a different message, a different voice comes along, starting in San Jose with Thomas Spear, continuing with Mackenzie Skapski in Calgary, and now he's a full-time National Hockey Leaguer. I think that's just great stuff.
Does Rolex make a fitness tracker watch, or does it have to be the one with the hands?
I'm pretty sure that Rolex doesn't lower it.
I like being able to see my heart rate and stuff.
He buy a ring or something like that, because I don't think that Rolex lowers itself to the status of fitness tracking.
Well, that's why I don't wear a Rolex.
Yeah, me too. That's why. That's why for me too. Good call, Darren.
We'll get into the
Apple Watches unite.
Yeah, we'll get into the Alpha Surge from Warrior in just a little bit. But first, let's check out the gear segment over at the Hockey Shop. Today, we're talking about the TPS Response Rubber stick. But what's happening with Cam & Company?
Well, first of all, it's not a rubber stick. Just so, I guess we could have left them in suspense, and they thought, but there is a rubber component.
But it sounds cool, doesn't it?
It does sound cool. Might be a little too whippy. It'd be like that Tristan Jarry stick I got once. It was so whippy I couldn't even shoot it. Yeah, you know what? They're busy over there. Boxing Day, they're through the Boxing Week sale. Again, to our American friends, that's our equivalent up here of Black Friday. They had savings up to 70% off. There are some carryover items. The massive savings, most of that stuff's gone. But there are still some great deals to be had, some carryover items. Much like the announcement of the Alpha Surge, there is a whole bunch of new product coming in the spring of 2026, and that means they have to create a bunch of space, and that means great savings on everything from sticks to accessories to pads to gloves, blockers, helmets, you name it. The Hockey Shop Sports for Sports, in addition to having the latest, including Von Ion line coming out. We already did Brian's Iconic 2, the Warrior Alpha Surge. All the new stuff is coming out soon, but they've also got savings on all the old stuff. Make sure you check it out online at thehockeyshop.com. And if you're lucky enough to be around in person and get to go bug Cam, the Hockey Shop Source for Sports in Langley.
Check it out. It's the gear segment dealing with the TPS Response Rubber with Cam and Woody.
Whoa. I haven't seen one of these in a long time. Like, we're throwing it back a little old school with the TPS branding on this new stick.
I demand a response from you.
TPS Rubber response.
Whoa.
You will get a response from me, Cameron, but it will not include rubber other than what is on this stick from TPS. So what do we got going here? Like, why in 2025 am I holding a TPS stick at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports? By the way, welcome back.
Yes.
to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports.
So
He's Cam, I'm Kevin. This is the gear segment, and this is the TPS Rubber Response.
we've had a bit of a revival of the TPS name. Yes, a conglomerate
A rubber response revival?
of Rubber Response Revival. Wow,
That's-
there you go. A nice little tongue twister. So that Louisville TPS response name.
Sorry, what?
Louisville.
Louisville. Thank you.
Louisville.
Just go before I get angry.
So we've got the response of that old school naming here. So conglomerate of companies have now revived that TPS name. So we see their composite sticks. We've seen a composite player stick, which has no importance to us because we're more focused on
We don't care about players.
No. 18K carbon,
Okay.
rubberized grip, exactly where you would hold the stick. So that goes up to
It's a nice tacky feel. I like it.
exactly stiff overall shaft, low kick point to the stick, decent overall flex, feels very, very rigid. Separation.
Stiffer stick, yeah.
Yeah, separation from, other sticks I would say on the market. I wouldn't say it's like as flexible. The way that carbon's laid is going to add a lot of rigidity to the stick. In theory, strength. I'm not going to say the word durability because it's always a hard
Tough
word.
one,
It's a
yeah.
tough word when it comes to
But usually when
goaltending.
it's stiffer, you usually get a little more mileage out of it.
That's exactly it. Overall, nice balanced overall feel too as well. And then I think we're
Like blade shape?
so curvature, yeah. So we're gonna be the same kind of like P31, P4 Crawford style curve, warrior twist,
That's not
all falling along the same lanes.
Okay. All right. Paddle lengths, standard, industry standard?
Correct.
Goodness.
Yes. So they are lining up with like what you would notice in like a Bauer, CCM, that kind of thing. Sizing all the way down into junior.
Junior, here's what I noticed about the junior that I really liked is we got this 21-inch, and is this junior or youth? I always mix it
Junior.
up. Okay, so TP31, so the same.
Ah,
Oh, you just got... Sorry, that was actually an accident, not on purpose.
that's 2 minutes. You can do that.
Yeah.
You feel shame.
I will go to the box and feel shame, Cam, especially over the holidays here. Just look like the shaft is narrower. Like, so why? It
And
makes
paddle.
sense to me. Sorry.
And blade.
Paddle is what I meant. It's all sort of narrow. It's all sort of sized down. I like that.
Yes.
Because why would we, just shorten the paddle but have this huge beefy thing for kids?
To be able to, again, throw around a little bit easier and whatnot, not necessarily, pulling that stick behind them. It is an extremely lightweight stick, so shouldn't necessarily be having that. But again, it's less material to kind of get in the way. So having that a little bit narrower, again, a little bit easier to control.
TPS, it's back. Did I tell you that it almost never left?
Yep.
I think we should have a story time with Kevin. I'll keep this brief, which is not something I do often.
Buckle up.
Years ago, a private equity firm, I believe, bought both Sherwood and TPS, and they had a decision to make. And they asked us which decision they should make. By us, I mean InGoal. Do we go with Marty Berder and Sherwood? Or do we go with this young Lundqvist kid and TPS?
What was your response?
We said TPS and Lundqvist. They went Sherwood.
Wah, wah.
The rest is history. Although,
It's back. It's back.
baby,
It's back.
I need Henrik Lundqvist to come out, although he's such a Bauer guy now.
Yeah, it's fair.
Anyways, TPS is back. If you got questions about where this stick fits in the lineup, because let me tell you, they have got a lineup here at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports. 1, 2, 3, like 4 stick racks, all goalie goodness, both sides around the corner, everything you can imagine. Where does this fit? What does it cost? All those prices. Hit Cam and his crew up at
604-589-8299 or 1-800-567-7790 or check us out at thehockeyshop.com.
TPS, Rubber Response. It's back, baby. And with that, we're out.
All right, I'm on there all the time, because I get the emails, so I immediately go check it out over at the Hockey Shop. And this is a good reminder for those of us that live in the States, because I tried to order something, but there's certain brands that they can't ship across the border, and I got all the way through, and then got the notice they can't ship the CCM across. So that's just a reminder for everybody.
That's a good reminder for everyone, Darren. Well done. But you do know that for yourself, you might have somebody who lives close to the Hockey Shop and also lives close to the border that might be able to help you with that and might be on this podcast with you right now. So you just hit me up on that,
I can probably who that is.
Yeah. So we had a fun little discussion there. It's funny. It brought back some memories. I don't think a lot of people realize that TPS as a brand kind of disappeared for a while. Now it's come back with this stick offering. But there was a time when a private equity firm bought both Sherwood and TPS, and amongst their discussions was one with us about which line should carry forward. It was Marty Berder Sherwood or Henrik Lundqvist TPS. Our opinion was Lundqvist. As much as we admired Brodeur, we thought go with the modern trend. They chose Sherwood. I think that was a couple owners ago. And now both brands sort of making comebacks mostly on the stick side. Sherwood obviously on the player side with Connor Bedard as a big name using the twig.
I use Sherwood sticks.
There you go. But yours are old and wooden like the old 70s,
No, it's
30s.
the Wrecker.
Oh, the Wrecker. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the new Sherwood stick.
But I do have a Pete Peters old Sherwood game used behind me.
Hanging behind you.
Yeah.
I know that thing probably weighs as much as my pads now.
I put it in the back of my truck for weight in the winter.
Yeah. Little extra traction.
Yeah.
Little extra traction. Because you need it with all the snow you get in Vegas.
Totally.
But like, it's funny to think, like, would things have been different for the complete line? Like that was right when Henrik Lundqvist was becoming the guy in New York. And you got to wonder if TPS hadn't disappeared. Remember those pads that he came over with in 2005?
Yeah.
Like and if that had been an option. The other interesting part that not a lot of people realize is that the designer at the time for TPS brought a pad to me to test here at South Surrey. I only got to wear it once. And the inside was hard, like a plastic edge. And I think it was a really straight pad, like Antiniemi-esque straight pad. But
I'm not a big fan of that.
But the sliding was unreal in it.
I like that.
And it was at a time before Bauer had come up with their Core-Tec, before we'd seen a Warrior slide plate. Like, if that company decides to keep the TPS brand, not only is it Lundqvist being pushed instead of Brodeur and a more traditional old school Sherwood, but I think they might have been ahead of the curve on some of this fast sliding material that we see now. So just one of those little history lessons that, what might have been had a private equity company gone a different way and listened to InGoal when that decision was made rather than somebody else who said, go with Brodeur and Sherwood.
All right. So sounds like your most distinctive memory of somebody wearing the TPS would be Henrik Lundqvist.
He jumps up first, but I also, what else? Like, wasn't Rolly Melanson wearing TPS with Edmonton in that run to the Cup final that ended with the injury in the Cup final?
Yes.
And then who was the backup that came off the bench and actually was wearing those pads? Was it Ty
Conklin?
And he was actually wearing a set of Melanson pads because some point, I remember I covered that Stanley Cup final for USA Today.
Dwayne Rollison.
Yeah. Dwayne, isn't that what I said?
Melanson.
Oh, I'm an idiot.
That's
Too
all
many
right.
pucks to the head. Dwayne Rollison wearing those pads and then Conklin coming off the bench and he was wearing the same pads and I covered that Stanley Cup final for USA Today and I remember going in and asking him like, just me or are you wearing? And he's like, no, like I actually tried his pads and really liked it at some point during the playoffs. So he ends up coming into the game and he's wearing an old pair of Rolly Melanson's pads. So Dwayne Rollison, Rolly Melanson, Dwayne Rollison. Clearly Kevin's taking too many pucks to the head today.
UC Markkanen was also part of that run. They used
Yes.
3 goaltenders in the Stanley Cup final that year. I was thinking TPS. I think it was Louisville though. Was Cujo wore that
You might be right.
in Edmonton for sure. That was those days. But I don't. Did Louisville cross over? I can't. Everything kind of melds together.
Well, when I think of TPS, I think of Louisville.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So it must have crossed over. And clearly I can't even get names right. So I shouldn't be the one giving history lessons today because large chunks of my brain no longer function.
Rolly the goalie. We just had him on, right?
He was awesome. He was a great guest. Yeah.
He was a video just dialed in. He loved his video back when he played.
Ahead of the curve.
And he used to catch the puck. That's what I remember about Rolly. Catch the puck and bat it out. Like he would throw it up and bat it out, backhand, out of the zone. He was one of the few guys in the league that ever did that. I'm not sure you get away with that now in the puck possession era of something like that.
Imagine if you could do it well enough to pull off an empty net goal that way.
And he also did the flip over backhand like Cujo.
Like Cujo. There we go. There's the tie-in.
Nobody flips over anymore. Right?
No, not at all. No.
We should bring that back.
Yeah. You think that's the difference maker for
Yeah.
us? You and me will bring that back, and Canada's calling us next time.
The Alpha Surge, we get the review going.
Yeah, make sure you check it out, InGoalMag.com. We unlock all our reviews, and this is one that it's more of an overview, but it's one we're excited to bring to you. Our partnership, being back on board with Warrior, allowed us to go to Montreal and really sort of dig in behind the scenes with their development team. What this pad and glove and some of the new iterations, the new design philosophies behind it, what it's all about, how it's supposed to perform. We can't wait to get it on the ice and test it ourselves and bring you tester feedback as we get closer to a spring launch at retail. But anytime a customizer launches, I don't think everybody realizes, like, when the customizer launches, that usually means you can order custom pads. Like, they're open for business if you want to go custom. And there's so much different about this pad and glove, the strapping, the materials, obviously the way the knee and the calf are attached. Still has the slide plate, removable, but there's just so much that's different. So many upgrades that they've made in this pad. So many innovations that I think, according to the people that have tested it so far, make it slide incredibly fast with or without the slide plate, even faster than G7. We wanted to make sure that we brought, an overall picture. Because if you're on that customizer, you design a set that you really like, and unlike Darren, you don't allow your dog to nudge you and wipe it all out, and you actually want to proceed to order, you kind of want to know what that pad's all about, like how it's going to actually perform. And there's a lot of unique aspects to this one. From a strapping perspective as well, they built a hammock on the back of the calf that, again, like all things Warrior, fully modular and adjustable. So if you don't like it, you can make it like a traditional strap. But a lot has gone into making a really modern, progressive pad with the ability to dial it into the type of connection and feel you would expect out of a softer, more flexible traditional pad. And so can't wait to get that on the leg and on the ice and see how all the innovation translates to performance.
So just a shout out to Ryan over at City National Arena. He is a goalie through and through, like right deep to the bones. And he's got too many sticks to count. I keep telling him, like, enough of the sticks. But he came to me the other day and said, have you checked out the Alpha Surge? It's awesome. I said, funny. We talked about that with InGoal. We've got a great deep dive on it, an overview. And I told him that I was on the customizer, and I was all the way through it, playing around with a couple of different things, changing it up. And right then, my dog gave me a little bump, and I lost it. Now I have to start over, which is going to be so much fun to be able to go through it and check it out. So there is some really cool things, playing around with the glove a little bit, and that's a great feature that Casimir Kaskasu really loves.
Yeah, no, and the big pockets continue, like the emphasis on a smaller cuff, bigger pocket that Kaz really liked when we did our overview of the gloves. But now, instead of having the same break angle and two different sort of glove builds around it, they've actually changed. So they still have the 75 degree, but now there's a 90 degree as well. And so rather than just changing where the pocket is in relationship to the break angle, they've done some of that and sort of, more higher up on the thumb, less on the fingers, but also changed the break angle itself. So more of a 90 degree sort of in your palm, fingers closing into the base of the thumb type closure that a lot of goalies are looking for. So again, can't wait to get it on the ice. It feels really good on your hand off the ice. And I just can't wait to see how all this translates and get it into the hands of our testers and get some feedback, because that's a big change, but there's also a lot of subtle changes. The strapping's been updated. They've got an imprint foam in there where your fingers should leave a mark and sort of allow you to sort of build a groove with where you want it in the glove. Just a ton of different things that all sound great in theory, and we just want to see how it works in reality. And we'll get that back to you once we get more feedback.
Great news. My lack of ability to stop pucks on a regular basis is not my fault. It all comes down to just an unstable pelvis. That's what happened. That's part of our conversation in our feature interview this week that we'll get to, brought to you by Sense Arena with the guys over at Sports Science Solution. Give everybody an idea of what's coming up.
Well, this is one where I wrote a story about sort of the butterfly and how teams were measuring drop rates using things like Catapult. And it ended up making the rounds, that story, in a USA Hockey goalie coach group chat. And Rob weighed in and talked about this technology that he developed. Rob Day of Sports Science Solutions along with Casey Cox. Now, Rob has coached right up to the NCAA. He's been coaching goalies for 40 years. Casey was one of his students, played up to college hockey, had to end early because of injuries and hips. Casey became like an elite high-end level PGA golf instructor. And some of the also doing a PhD in biomechanics. And some of the golf technology, he was able to apply it to motion capture. And they're going to get into it and explain it much better than I am right now. But basically to identify what really, he wanted to figure out why his body broke down at such an early age on him. Can we do anything to fix it? Can we do anything different with goaltenders to help them avoid it? And what it led to, thanks to some of this technology that they adapted to hockey and goaltending, was the ability to just sort of see where these injuries originate, to predict them somewhat in terms of what patterns are going to lead to certain types of injuries. And if you can predict an injury coming, that means you can start to take preventative measures. So some really fascinating stuff, including, as much as we focused, and I in my writing have focused on the butterfly drop, the reality that a hard T-push stop, if you really kick that heel out, actually creates more shear force inside the hip than the butterfly drop, and may be doing just as much, if not more damage for certain goaltenders. We get into all those things in this discussion. So a couple of guys that love and live the position, even if they're not playing it anymore at a really high level. Rob has an engineering background. Obviously, Casey has a biomechanics, working towards his PhD in biomechanics right now. Fascinating background there. And the two of them have used some of the tools from the golf world, brought them into hockey, and created the ability to sort of measure what really matters when it comes to goaltending health, goaltending injuries, and goaltending hips. And we get into all of it over the course of 45 minutes in this week's feature interview.
Yeah, two extremely intelligent human beings, but don't be intimidated.
Plus me.
But they do an incredible job walking everybody through it in conversation with you. So looking forward to that in just a little bit. First, let's get to the Vizual Edge Pro Reads.
And this week on the Vizual Edge Pro Reads, we're going to go to Alex Lyon. Before we get there, though, do you want the puck to look like a beach ball? Every goalie has that night here and there where the puck looks huge. You're ahead of every play. You feel calm, patient, in total control. Then there are the nights where you're a half step late. You see it, but you don't really see it. You're reaching, guessing, fighting it. That's not your technique. That's your eyes and brain not processing the play fast enough. Vizual Edge fixes that. It measures how well your eyes track and process the game, then gives you a custom plan that trains it. 3 15-minute sessions a week are all it takes. On your laptop, on your tablet. I almost said on your Talbot because, of course,
that would make sense.
It would have made sense because he's a Vizual Edge user.
Yeah.
On your tablet, on your couch, wherever. It's what NHL goalies use to make the game slow down when it matters most. And of course, you get a discount using InGoal, all caps, INGOAL, at checkout. But if you're a member and you check out our Pro Reads, you get a member exclusive double discount and you get that code. I almost said the code out on air, Darren. This is clearly how messed up I am tonight. You need to be a member and you need to go to a Pro Reads at InGoalMag.com and you will see that members only code to save double. I think it's 10% with the regular one and 20% with the InGoal code. So make sure you check that out. It's great savings. And also make sure you check it out because it's a great way to make more saves. And in this week's Pro Reads, we break down a lateral backdoor with Alex Lyon. And there's an element of sort of movement and of tracking and anticipation in this Pro Reads, but mostly it's a great lesson on the importance of preparation, even when you're not starting a game. Because this is Alex Lyon getting into a game because Colton Ellis got involved in a collision that led to a concussion or a concussion spotter. He goes in cold for the second straight night, ends up winning the game, and this was the win that started the 10 straight for the Buffalo Sabres. This was the moment that started it for him, where he played, I believe, the first 6 of those 10 in a row. All started by coming off the bench. So he walks us through the important aspects of preparation, both mentally and physically, that allowed him to come into that game, and how in the opening minutes, sometimes you just have to survive knowing you don't have your A stuff. Your hips aren't functioning the way they normally are. You've been sitting on a bench for 40 minutes before you get into the game. Survive to the end of the period, then reset and go from there. And so some great lessons in this week's Pro Read from Alex Lyon on sort of how to do that, as well as the actual breaking down of the situation and how he managed it in his own words. Not a pretty looking save, but still got himself into a spot where he was basically forcing the shooter to make a perfect shot to beat him by filling a good chunk of the net.
All right, somewhere in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or possibly Ontario, David Hutchison is working his way around Western Canada, and he stops by with our Stop It Goaltending U, the app parent segment. Before we get to Hutch, what's happening over at Stop It Goaltending?
How about 25 years of NHL goalie coaching experience at your fingertips?
I like
That's
it.
That sounds good to me. That's what they put into the Stop It Goaltending U. You want to tap into goalie parenting expertise that helped Joey Decord reach the NHL? That's what you get with a subscription to Stop It Goaltending U, the app. All that knowledge from Brian Decord, who's been an NHL goalie coach, scout, and director, as well as the insights and expertise from his staff at Stop It, which last year celebrated 25 years as one of the world's top goalie schools, and includes teachers who work and are working right up to the NCAA and some in the National Hockey League in scouting capacities. All delivered to you on your phone or tablet in easy-to-digest chunks, including 5 short daily primers each week, weekly style analysis and breakdown videos, and drills that you can take onto the ice with your team and coach. Plus, you get an InGoal Premium subscription included. So check it out now at the App Store or Google Play Store and get the best of both worlds with a subscription to Stop It Goaltending U, the app, and a subscription that comes with it to InGoal Magazine Premium.
Was Hutch able to give you a heads up of what he's going to talk about? Because he won't share that stuff with me.
Well, he trusts me, Darren. He trusts me.
That makes sense.
So this week's parent segment is about not getting too caught up in the identity, too tied up into the identity, into the game as parents and as goalies. And so some important lessons from Hutch on that in this week's parent segment.
That's why he wouldn't share it with me, because I wouldn't understand that. Hutch, explain.
One of the most common questions in youth hockey is also one of the most uncomfortable. Whose dream is this? And the honest answer, most of the time, is that it lives on both sides of the relationship. The parent side. As parents, we don't just support our kids' goaltending journeys, we organize our lives around them. The schedules, the travel, the community, the pride in watching them chase something hard. Over time, it's easy for the supportive parent to quietly become a core part of who we are. And that's not wrong. But there's a moment where support can drift into something heavier, when their success feels like validation for you, when their struggles get to feel too personal for you, and when stepping back would feel like losing a piece of yourself. A useful check-in isn't, am I too invested? It's, if this ended tomorrow, what would I need help letting go of? That question isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Now, on the child's side, we have to worry about one role becoming the whole person. For kids, goaltending can become a powerful identity. It's how they're known. It's where they feel competent. It's where they receive praise and attention, which are so important to them. But kids, of course, are still building who they are as a person. They aren't just goaltenders. They're students, they're friends, siblings, creators, thinkers, leaders. There's so much more to being a child than just being a goaltender. When one identity crowds out the others, and let's be honest, it often does, even in a positive way, it creates a risk. Not just a burnout, but fragility. Because if being a goalie becomes the only place they feel valued, then those bad games hit them a lot harder. It feels a lot more personal. And change can be a real threat to them. So I actually think these two things overlap on each other. Parents and kids can both become overinvested in the same identity for different reasons. Parents may cling to the journey because it provides meaning and connection. And of course, we're doing it because we love our kids. Kids may cling to it because it provides certainty and approval. And of course, it's fun. Now, neither is wrong, but we need to balance them. We have to work on both sides. The solution, of course, isn't to care less. It's actively cultivating other parts of the identity on both sides. For parents, that might mean reinvest parts of yourself that existed before you were in the rink all the time. Protect some of those relationships and interests that have nothing to do with hockey. And letting your child see that your world is bigger than their performance. That's not to put them down. That's to make sure that they understand that when things don't go well for them, that's okay. We don't want them feeling that this is everything to you and that when things don't go well for them, they're letting you down. For the kids, it means we need to celebrate effort and character, not just the outcomes. Because effort and character can carry over into any role in their life. We need to really support, even encourage interests that are outside the crease. And we need to make it clear repeatedly that their value doesn't change on hard days. Indeed, that our value we see in them is not about being a goaltender, that we love them for everything else about them. Just importantly, it means we have to practice letting go even while we're still involved. Let go of the control so it's theirs. Let go ownership of the outcomes. Let go of the idea that this path has to look a certain way. And that's something we definitely get tied up in. Parents all the time talking in the rink to each other about what's Johnny doing, what's Susie doing, making sure we're following just the right path. Every child can have their own path inside and outside the rink. Now, bringing it all back together, the healthiest goalie journeys are the ones where parents stay engaged without being too entangled, where kids feel supported without being defined, where both sides understand that this chapter matters, but it isn't the whole story. The goal isn't to protect the dream at all costs, it's to protect the people living inside it. When both parents and kids are allowed to be more than just goalie and goalie parent, the game actually becomes safer, healthier, and more enjoyable for everyone.
Hutch will be back with us as part of the overall packaging of this podcast next week. It's good to have him around to keep us in line because we got a little goofy early on. We went down a couple of different avenues that we weren't intending.
No, when dad's away, the kids will play.
Yeah, party time. Dude, that's dangerous. Now imagine the damage we could have done, you and I, throwing house parties.
House wrecker for sure.
Oh, house wrecker for sure. There'd be some gyp rock patching going on.
No, not necessarily. Not unless you were the bad boy, because I've got a few house parties that included like 250 people in my history. But I also had a buddy back in school who ultimately ended up in the Hells Angels, and he worked the door.
Really?
So it was all in the backyard. I almost got away with it. It wasn't for the empties in the bushes a week later that were discovered, and maybe some calls from the neighbors about the 250 people in the cul-de-sac. Not a person made a peep in the house. I can tell you that because I had some muscle out there. My brother he snuck out and couldn't even get back into the house that night.
I once put a hockey poster on the wall in our kitchen at when my parents got home.
To cover up what?
Yeah, because there's a hole in the drywall. I'm like,
so
I can't believe they picked up on that.
See, my OCD carried me through. My bad boy stage came with OCD cleanliness. So
it was a good life lesson, though, on how to fix a hole, because I've had to do it a few times over the years, being a home owner. So let's get into our NHL Sense Arena feature interview. And before that, a message from NHL Sense Arena.
We always talk about how NHL Sense Arena is constantly evolving. And one of the things that they've added this year, or they've increased the focus on this year, is hockey IQ. We all know that it's important, goalie IQ. And this is the year you can make 2026 count. This is the year of hockey IQ for goalies. Every season, goalies focus on quicker feet, stronger pushes, and better technique. But the biggest jump in performance is often from something less visible. How fast you read the play, anticipate threats, and make decisions under pressure. This year, commit to goalie IQ training and see the difference show up in every game. From recognizing developing plays earlier to manage rebounds, puck touches, and traffic more confidently, goalie IQ training helps you play calmer, faster, and more in control. When your mind is ahead of the puck, the game starts to slow down and your consistency goes way up. So goalie IQ training is a big part of 2026 for NHL Sense Arena. We've talked about it before. It's not just a great way to get reps without having to get ice. There are so many extra components, reading plays, decision-making speed, visual tracking, all trained and measured by NHL Sense Arena. Make sure you check out their latest offerings, their latest iterations when you download the app onto your headset.
What do you think the percentage is of goaltenders in the National Hockey League that train their eyes or warm up with their eyes?
I think they all do something,
Yeah.
right? Like there's some that use NHL
You don't see them
Sense
all.
Arena.
Some
there's-
are on the bench before a warm up and cameras catch them. But
Yeah, you see
think
Hellebuck doing the
yeah.
eyes back and forth, different focal points. We used to see Braden Holtby doing it. We know guys use Vizual Edge. We know guys use NHL Sense Arena. You know, guys bouncing balls off walls. Definitely, I think everybody's got something they do to warm up their eyes.
And then you get into the pelvis, which is really the starting point for everything for goaltending. Didn't know that until I listened to this conversation that you had with Rob and Casey over at Sports Science Solutions. And these guys are way out of my league when it comes to intelligence. But the way they break this down and the impact on the body and the wear and tear and being able to manage it or predict injuries and get in front of it. This is one of the best interviews in all the episodes of InGoal Radio, the podcast.
Yeah, and this is, my favorite one. Like, the two kinds of favorites, right? Like, we had Drew Comesso on recently, and that's one of you, like, when you discover a guy, you've always talked about, like, the first time you heard an interview with Jeremy Swayman in college.
Yeah.
Those are my favorites when we get to know a young up-and-comer. Getting a lot of that in the PWHL right now, too, by the way. Some great interviews there. My other one is when, we write a story or something and we get feedback and somebody new comes into our world based on, interaction with something we've posted and a response to it. And that's exactly what this is. I had not heard of Sports Science Solutions. I had heard a little bit of Rob Day, but I'd never met Casey Cox. I didn't know much about what they were doing. And now, honestly, after sort of getting the background on it and getting a better understanding of it and then having this conversation with them, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm a little surprised that more NHL teams aren't investing in a conversation and with them, especially when
I think that's coming after this.
Yeah, like, it's one thing to be like, they've unlocked, and you listen to this conversation, they didn't go in with any preconceived notions. They tested one team, and then that team ran into injuries, and they said, okay, before you tell us what the injuries are, here's what here's what our data says is most likely to be, and it matched. So what the data was showing them would likely lead to injuries ultimately did. So now your next step as you sort of dig through that is, okay, if we're correct and we can do this, that means we can start to take preventative measures. And imagine the value of that to an NHL team. Like, to be able to recognize instability and know what it's going to lead to and start to train to prevent it. Or know that because we focus so much on load management in the NHL, but talking to these guys, there's more to it. There's another level here. So, anyways, listen, let's just go
just how to get better. Like,
the efficiencies.
Concentrate on a deficiency to make yourself better. It's the same as working on your glove hand. If you think your glove's slow, but work on an area of the body that's going to help you.
Right, and they can measure some of the efficiency improvements and find efficiency improvements in movement within that. So it's not just preventative in terms of injury and being able to identify it before it happens, which I think has huge value. But you're right, Darren. It's also, there's also a performance aspect of this, and we even get into the neurological side of it with Casey as well. So as it branches off, clearly all these things connected, as we know as goaltenders, these guys just define it at a level I've never heard before. So fascinating conversation. Can't wait to share it with everyone.
So as you get ready to listen to this, I want you to visualize your body and think about your pelvis and your chest and your head and where all that is tying in. And as you listen, you can almost play along and visualize your body as the guys talk about the different attributes of making saves and that impact on your hips and your frame of your body. It is the NHL Sense Arena feature interview. Fascinating stuff. Can't wait to bring this to you. with Rob Day and Casey Cox from Sports Science Solutions. Enjoy.
We've got a special interview for you here on the InGoal Radio podcast today, one that I'm not quite sure where this is going to go, because we started talking biomechanics. I heard the phrase neuromechanics, which is totally new to me. But you know that we love digging into all things new and sciencey and anything innovation-wise that can help goalies we're all about. So I'm really happy to introduce Rob Day and Casey Cox. They do work with Motion IQ, and they've dug into some of these biomechanics at a level that I'm not sure all of us really are aware of or understand. So for starters, guys, introduce yourselves to our audience. Fill us in a little bit on your background, how you connected and how this all got started. Catch us up.
Sure. Well, I'm Rob Day, co-founder of Sports Science Solutions, and my partner, Casey Cox. I am a goaltender coach of 41 years on a part-time basis, 27 on a full-time. I've coached I'm a former engineer prior to that, made everything from missiles and Nerf balls, but I've coached at the NCAA men's Division 1, 2, and 3 level, the NCAA women's Division 1 and 3 level, every level of juniors you can coach at, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, coach at the club level and of NCAA and boys and girls prep hockey, in addition to youth hockey. Parent of a female goaltender that went on to play in the NCAA, and parent of a soccer goalie currently in the NCAA. So, and my father was a goaltender. So many years, generations of goaltending in our family. So it kind of runs into that. Casey is a former student of mine, and brought about 8 years ago now, brought an interesting concept here. So I'm going to let him speak about his background as well. And that.
Yeah, thanks. Casey Cox here. The other co-founder from Sports Science Solutions, and like Rob mentioned, former goalie student of his. Hockey is the love of my life and still is. So through my career, I ended up making it to the NCAA level. By the time I got to college, my hips and my body were really breaking down. And so after college, my curiosity level in trying to help break down the mechanics of goaltending and try to solve some of the common problems we see with hips kind of led me down the road of biomechanics. I've always been involved with the golf industry in some way, shape, or form. Just out of chance, I started working at a golf course when I was young and became a golf professional post-college, and then really started to apply biomechanics through golf and started to research in golf, but also had this itch to move outside of golf and move back into the hockey world and apply a lot of these biomechanical concepts into hockey. So I reached out to Rob probably around 2016, 2017 area, and we started talking about what this might look like to bring biomechanics into hockey. We were using some technology in golf that allowed us to take really deep level biomechanical analysis, what I describe as in the wild, and we applied that to hockey. So we're using some of the most advanced technology that the game has ever seen to take, more advanced data on biomechanical forces and movement on the ice than anything we've ever seen. So we've used that data over the years to understand the structures of hockey, everything from skating to shooting and goaltending, and really have been able to break down those mechanics on a biomechanical level to understand where the causes are coming from in a lot of these common injuries that we see through hockey players.
And I think we've amassed over that time frame, 1.8 trillion data points, Casey? I think that's around pretty close.
Yeah. So it's a lot.
Yeah, over 1,000 players. Yeah, over about 1,000 players.
Okay, so because some of the findings might, from what I understand from brief conversations, and I'm diving into this for the first time myself as well here, folks, but might run a little counterintuitive to some of the butterfly narratives and some of the things that we assume or that we've been told to assume for a long time. So I don't know if you want to go there first or explain a little bit more about those measurements, about some of those focal points, and about some of the technology that's allowed you to, that you've been a part of developing, that's allowed you to sort of examine these things maybe through a lens that others aren't seeing.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is pretty unique. It was an adapted system, like I said, that came from golf. We're using sensors that take three-dimensional acceleration measurements, three-dimensional gyroscopic, so rotational accelerations, and then you're looking as well at magnetometers. So the sensors themselves integrate three different units: an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a magnetometer. basically what that gives you is the ability to measure force in all three dimensions. And so these sensors allow us not just to measure where a player is moving or where their body part moved to, but actually measuring the force that got that movement to occur. And so when we look back at kind of the biomechanical spectrum, it's important to understand, if we go back to, I hate to turn this into a physics class, but Newton's first law. And so if we look at that, objects at rest stay at rest, objects in motion stay in motion, right? We've all kind of heard that before. The easy way to say that and the practical way to look at that is force comes before movement, right? And so if we want to understand movement, if we want to understand goaltending movement, like a butterfly, understanding the forces that cause that movement to occur is exceptionally important. And the system that we're using allows us to measure those forces in all three dimensions of movement. And so when we put this sensor on the body, or we put multiple sensors in the body, we start to understand how the body is creating force and what that relationship of force is moving through the body, which again allows us to understand joint load and these other types of metrics that are associated with the injuries that we're seeing. And so through those measurements, we get to see the patterns of force that correlate to function. We get to see the patterns of force that correlate to injury. And so when we assess an athlete or a goaltender, we're able to start to see the underlying effects of what's going on kind of under the hood of that car, so that we can look down the road and say, okay, this pattern is going to lead to X, Y, or Z in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to miss that, because this isn't just about maybe some observations that might run counter to previous assumptions, but you're able to actually, this is diagnostic. You can identify patterns that are going to lead to problems hopefully before those problems occur, if you're assessing athletes and using these tools and these sensors.
1000%. And I think for us, the real differentiator for us is that we wanted to base what we were doing not just in our opinions. Rob's been an amazing goaltender coach his whole life. I know that because I was one of his students, but being able to apply objective data to what we do really differentiates what we're doing. I'm not there rendering my opinion on this person or how they're moving. I do have an opinion, right, based on my own goaltending experience, my own coaching experience. But that's not what we're basing our decision-making process on. We've taken our entire assessment and our entire decision-making process and objectively began to measure things that guide the process of what moving forward for that athlete looks like. And I think it's that the ability to objectively measure this information that so directly correlates back to function and health that has really distinguished what we are doing in terms of the ability to really uncover things on a much deeper level than what we've ever been able to do.
Yeah, and I think we found that out too when we first started off. Excuse me there, Kevin. When we first started off, I think one of the first goaltenders that we had worked with ended up playing Division I college, and he did a couple of movements in our testing, and Casey noticed, hey, this is a pattern here that might cause you an issue down the road. We took the information, got it to his respective strength coach, and then we turned around and were able to test him a couple months later after him spending some time in the corrective action piece, and came back that, hey, all right, we've been able to correct that pattern for you. And there was an additional situation where my daughter was playing for one junior team, and they had to cancel a tournament. And we had tested that junior team, prior, right, when we were just in the data collection stage. And they couldn't play the tournament because too many of the skaters were injured. So we went back through and as I kind of remember the story, I said, well, Casey's the genius part in this here. I said, it's going to be the blind leading the blind. So I went down and talked to the coach, and we said, all right, here's what we found with these girls. This is where we see the injury. What is it? This is where we see the potential injury. What is it? And we were like spot on 100% for the ones that were injured. So, and that was at the very early stages, and that's been refined as we've gone along. I just wanted to add that in there because I think it was relevant to how much we've been able to, how good Casey's been able to dial in on the software so that we can get really good prediction of where something could go wrong for somebody, but also improve their performance too.
So that predictive nature, I mean, I'm thinking like if I'm an NHL team, I'm just like, I should be all over this. Like I want to see when injuries are going to come, from being able to strap these sensors on. And I know it applies to more than just goaltenders, as you just said, but maybe can you give me an example? Because we haven't named names, but can you give me an example of like something that you see in the data and what type of correction you could make in the training that reduces maybe like almost like an example that just sort of brings it into real world terms for the goalies that are listening, and they're trying to picture in their mind what that looks like. What would they see that would allow me to fix something and prevent an injury?
So one of the things that we look at a lot is pelvic stability. It's kind of what we look at as the foundation of health for a goalie. And so the pelvis is the bone structure that connects your torso to your hips, right? And so the pelvic structure for goaltenders we have found tends to be extremely unstable. Part of the issue with observing this is that when a goalie wears pants, we can't see if his pelvis is unstable and moving around or not, because the pelvis is moving independently of what you're looking at with that player's equipment. So when we started looking at pelvic measurements, we started to see how much excessive movement was actually happening through that part of the body. And that's linked to the body's recovery from balance. So if the body is in a position where the nervous system does not feel it's balanced, it's going to start using pieces of the body, the rib cage and the pelvis mainly, to start moving those pieces around to try to create that balance. Well, all of that excessive movement of the body trying to seek balance is taking away from the ability to react directly to, say, a shot, right? And so if the body has to go through this corrective process, and that may take milliseconds, but that's creating a delay between the time when the body can react to the shot and actually move to that shot. So what we'll see a lot is there's a delay feature. Let's say a shot comes from the point in the middle of the ice and the goalie's going to make a glove save. We'll actually see the more pelvic instability there is, the body is instinctually going to draw the hands inward. It's going to draw the elbows and arms inward to the body while it's going through this resolution to its balance. Once it's balanced, then it'll allow you to extend. And so you'll see a lot of goalies that struggle to use their hands or struggle to use their legs for rebound control effectively because they're actually fighting stability issues in the pelvis. And when we measure that, we can start to create that awareness for the goalie. And as soon as we create that stability, you're going to see the reaction times of the arms and the legs go up tremendously, as well as that goalie's ability to recover and just maintain balance in the everyday flow of goaltending. So that's a really basic example.
And I'm guessing that instability is also the corrective parts. Like you have more moving parts in the body. That's where you add the force applied to goaltending and instability and moving parts. That's probably where we get into the injury savings.
Absolutely. And this is where, again, we started looking at this functionally, trying to understand what this looked like. And Rod kind of mentioned that case study where we had looked at the girls team. And again, at the early stages, we weren't rendering any opinions on anything because we didn't know what we were looking at. And that case study, when we went back and were able to look and find those injury predictions, really started us down this road of being able to correlate patterns to injury. And what we found with goaltending is that pattern of function in the pelvis is not just linked to performance, which it is directly related to reaction timing and performance, but it's also the number one link to the injuries that we see in hips. And so all of that excessive movement changes the load of the hip, and it changes how that hip socket moves. And the more unstable the pelvis is, the less mobile the hip joint becomes. And so you're going down into these butterflies. If your hips are unstable and your pelvis is unstable, you're putting excessive load into those joints. And so you're really increasing the amount of load and the wear and tear on the body. And it's not necessary. There's no functional need for the pelvis to be doing all that extra movement other than a lack of understanding and training. And as coaches, we can't see that stuff. I can't look at a goalie with my eyes and see whether his pelvis is stable or not. And so being able to measure these and not just measure the movement, but like I said, measure the actual forces that are moving through this player's pelvis gives us the understanding of what type of risk this player is at for not only losing functionality over time, but health. And that's really, again, why we got into this whole thing.
Well, I think of a pelvis as sort of a fixed bone structure, but obviously that's too narrow thinking, because all the muscles that attach to it and through that area are all things that can be trained differently to improve stability, I would imagine.
Of course. Yeah. And there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of integrated, muscle structures and other reasons why the body will move the way it moves. And this is where we get into the neural side, right? So my biomechanics background led me to some blockages where I found that regardless of addressing biomechanical issues, we weren't able to uncover or unlock certain patterns, which leads us to that next stage, which is your nervous system controls everything. Your muscles are slaves to your nervous system, right? And so if we want to understand biomechanics, neuromechanics, and how your brain operates is really what's controlling the decision-making process for the body. And so you can get yourself into an example here where if the body is not balanced, you're going to have an effect from the nervous system, right? So your autonomic nervous system is controlling things that we don't necessarily think about, your breathing and your balance, right? And it's going to prioritize those things over anything that you ask it to do. And that's why in the example that I gave, when you're in balance, your body is going to try to resolve balance before you actually go and make that save. Well, the same is true of your pelvis here, right? If we're dealing with imbalance issues in your pelvis, your autonomic nervous system is always going to resolve those issues before it allows you to function. So if your nervous system is controlling your body and making decisions for any given reason, and you're not addressing those issues, your body is going to resist change. So you might understand exactly what I'm asking you to do. You may be able to do it in a drill, but when your body comes down to a reactive state and it's time to actually do that, it's not going to do it if there is the nervous system standing in its way. So there are multiple kind of layers to what we're talking about doing here.
It's interesting too, because I think of vestibular probably plays a role in this as well, and how we move, like our body automatically making adjustments in how we move based on what it senses in our balance also dictates some of this instability, right? If our body thinks we're falling backwards because we pulled our head off a puck going east-west, then it automatically does certain things through the torso and even with butterfly width to compensate from that. And that's where that neurological you can say, don't do this biomechanically, like keep that butterfly wide. But as soon as you get into that vestibular and that neurological, it's forcing the body. And when you start fighting against those things, I'm guessing that's another area where you're going to start creating injuries because the automated part is telling the body to do one thing and you're trying to train it to do another.
And you get into efficiencies as well too. You know, if you start cutting down your efficiencies depending on how many things you have to start accessing to perform your movements.
And that all plays back to mental clarity, right? When your body is going through this high level stress and it's trying to recover from all these positions, it's really hard to stay mentally clear. And all of these systems start to play together, right? To say that we're dealing with an isolated system is missing the bigger picture of all of the different influences that we're dealing with here. And I think that is where for us, getting the big picture through our assessment and looking at, again, we do a nervous system assessment, we're doing physical movement screens, we're doing actual functional screens while you're playing the game, right? We're trying to leave no stone unturned in that objective assessment so that we understand where all the physical pieces are. Because I may be looking at something on the ice that I don't like from a movement standpoint, maybe it's way you're reacting to pucks or recovering or whatever it may be. And I might find that, that's not necessarily correlated to a functional movement issue. Maybe it's a nervous system issue, right? Or vice versa, So I think for us, looking at all the different objective measures gives us a really clear picture of not only what's happening, but how that is happening and why it's happening. And if we want to understand how to properly prescribe a blueprint for the future for an athlete to stay healthy and maximize their performance, understanding all of those components to me is a non-negotiable. I don't think that leaving any of those pieces out is going to give you an accurate idea of what the best course of action moving forward for that goalie is.
Talking about conclusions, or maybe conclusions is the wrong word. I apologize. Don't have a science background. I don't want to be too in a position where there are no absolutes. I don't want to be the one using absolute terms here. So what are some of the things though that, like, it sounds like there are maybe some assumptions, including assumptions I've made in my writing, frankly, about the butterfly and about the effects and that maybe aren't matching some of what you're finding in this research in terms of where those impacts are coming from. And obviously the pelvic instability plays a role in it. But even with a stable pelvis, you're still dropping into a position that's probably not overly natural for the human body. So, but have we overstated the butterfly's role in this? I know there's some studies out there about, kicking the heel out in a hard stop on a T-push, creating a lot of that internal rotation and perhaps being just as damaging when we talk about goalies and hips long terms. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are maybe more broadly applied, as much as each goalie is an individual and has their own biomechanics that they bring to this assessment?
Well, you raise a really interesting point with that because, again, we do demonize the butterfly a lot. We have some really interesting research going on right now down in Dallas, and that research is really starting to differentiate where these forces and the magnitude of the forces and how frequently those forces occur. I think that it's for some players it's more of one than another, right? I would say it's not always just one. The butterfly is it's an unnatural movement pattern, even when done to the best of our abilities, right? So there's an inevitability right now based on the design of equipment and the way that the movement pattern is, that there's just an inevitability. It's not healthy for the athlete. So yes, we are trying to minimize the damage that's done by that movement pattern, but that's one that has an inevitable effect to it over time. The other one you mentioned, which I think is really interesting and overlooked, are these hard stops. We're seeing, like, we just analyzed a goalie a couple months ago. I believe he's a Division I player, and his hip accelerations were twice in his stopping that it was in his butterfly. So he was sending twice as much load, rotational shear load through that hip joint as he was when he was butterflying. And that's just completely unnecessary, right? I mean, you're talking about a movement pattern stopping that just doesn't, there are so many other ways you could teach somebody on a mechanics level to stop, to completely remove any ill effects from that. And so those are the things I look at. Again, the butterfly, are you ever going to get away from completely doing damage? No, but we can minimize it. Stopping, that's a low-hanging fruit that, again, that we shouldn't be seeing that in any goaltenders. That's completely unnecessary. It's not tied to anything that functionally needs to be going on. And so, yeah, I look at that stuff, and there are certain pieces of this that are more egregious than others. But I would say there is a very short list of things, of principles that we would live by and say that all goalies need to check these boxes to maximize their ability to, again, maximize performance, minimize risk injury. And based upon that foundation, again, that's where you're going to get into the very subjective nature of how we're moving and the best course of action for each player based on how they move and all these different factors. But yes, there is absolutely a foundational base of patterns that we would live by and say that these are non-negotiables. I'm
nervous to even ask because I don't want to give away anything proprietary, but like, what are some of those boxes that you can share that, like, in terms of how they're moving? And I not to pull on a whole bunch of strings at once, but when we talk about changing how we stop, and like that's astonishing to me that it's twice the force, because the irony is we'll quite often say less butterfly drops make more stand-up saves. But if we've got a goalie who's creating twice as much, I believe the term you used was shear force, inside their hip every time, then telling them to stand up more and push around more rather than drop actually maybe doing more harm.
And that comes back to assessment and understanding the athlete you're working with, right? Because, again, if we're just guessing about all this stuff and we're just taking these principles and blanketly applying it to everybody, they're missing the bigger picture, right? So, yeah, I think understanding how that athlete's kind of fingerprint of movement and force looks like is very important when it comes to the decision-making process. But I think, again, you're getting back into principles. Pelvic stability is that number one principle for us, right? If we look, and I don't want to get too deep into the science here, but if you look down at the three dimensions of movement, right, you've got your sagittal plane, which is your forward and backwards movement. So in hockey, for goaltender, the sagittal plane should be 100% stable. We don't want movement, which means we don't want that forward and backward rocking of the hips. When you are stable in the sagittal plane, which is that forward and backward plane, that unlocks the mobility in the frontal plane, which is where we create our power. So as a goaltender, if you're unstable in the first plane of motion, your body's not going to allow you to move to the second plane of motion. And so we look at this kind of as an unlocking sequence where when one part of your body is doing what it should be, the next part of that sequence is unlocked. So we think about movement as kind of this long train, right? You've got a lot of interconnected pieces that are all influencing one another. So to get back to one of your points earlier, I don't know that we're necessarily misidentifying things to talk about in goaltending, but I think we're maybe not understanding where those pieces or elements fall on this train. right? Because we may be talking about things that are happening towards the back of the train. And it would be incorrect to say that they're not influential or they're not a part of that train, because they are. But it's important to understand the context that there are other elements that are further up in that train that are influencing the reality of what you're talking about. And so, again, if we want to talk about hand speed or reaction speed of the hands, right, that's a really good example that ties back to your pelvic stability. If the pelvis is unstable, that's the front of the train. If that's derailing every time, you could be doing as good a job as you can with arm positioning and all that. You're not going to maintain it because the train already derailed. Right. And so you could be in the fourth train car back, managing that fourth train car perfectly, doing everything you need to do to have a perfect fourth train car. If the third train car keeps going off the tracks, you're going to keep going too. So that's the concept from a biomechanical standpoint, is understanding that there's a chain reaction going on, and getting to the front of that train and analyzing objectively what's going on allows you to understand which part of this train do I actually need to assess, which do I need to look at. And so that's, again, I would look at it as if the foundation is the non-negotiable.
It's funny because we talk about pelvis, and there's been a lot of talk about pelvis in the goaltending world around the phrase neutral pelvis. And I don't know if a neutral pelvis is inherently more stable. If a neutral, there's also conversations about whether if we create that, can you even maintain that once you drop into a butterfly, or is that restrictive? Again, without getting, and I apologize because I'm asking specific questions, and there may be some you don't want to answer, and that's fair because you're developing a product here as well, obviously. But like where from a coaching standpoint versus what the data is saying, where does that kind of fit?
First of all, I would say the neutral pelvis, again, from a kinesiology standpoint, we could define what neutral is. But neutral for an individual is going to be slightly different based on muscle tone and based on neurological patterning. This is kind of the way that I would look at that. Again, if you're tying in an element for an individual, right? Let's say neutral pelvis is also dependent on rib cage position. Okay, so really what we're looking at is the relationship between your rib cage and your pelvis. Okay, we want a stable pelvis, but we also need the rib cage and pelvis's relationship to maintain connection. And the way that we maintain connection between the ribcage and pelvis is by keeping the muscles that physically connect to both of those things turned on. Okay, so we're talking about core engagement, right? So can you go into a butterfly, maintain a neutral pelvis, and keep your core engaged? Here's an example of the reason why somebody might be able to do that in practice or during a drill, but when it comes time for a game, that they don't do that. And this is why it's important not only to measure them in a static environment, but I want to measure them in a reactive environment, what I described earlier as being in the wild, right? So our technology being able to measure these things in the wild while somebody's actually reacting and playing gives me a completely different lens on the behavior of their nervous system when it comes time to actually perform these things. So here's an example of why somebody would be able to maintain this neutrality and this engagement in a controlled setting, but not a reactive setting, okay? So we talked earlier about your nervous system being in charge of this decision-making process, okay? One of the patterns that your nervous system operates and controls is your breathing. Okay. And I apologize. We're going to get down a rabbit hole here. So
hey, we love rabbit holes at InGoal.
I'll bring the carrots.
If you're willing to give us the time, we will take all the rabbit holes we can handle. Thank you, sir.
So we'll go a little bit deeper here. So your nervous system, one of the primary things that your nervous system is operating is your breathing. Okay. So you're breathing about 20,000 times a day, right, for the average human being. So that is a tremendous workload on your nervous system, right? The muscles associated with inhaling and exhaling are all influenced by this 20,000 repetition activity that you do every day. Nothing that we're going to do is ever going to match the rep threshold of your breathing. So the process your body takes, the process your nervous system decides to take for this breathing is exceptionally important. Now, when we look at this, your body, based on the level of different things it needs to handle, right? Your breathing, your heart rate, all your organ function, all this stuff is autonomously happening. If your body believes it can gain 0.5% of efficiency by putting you in a certain position or turning a certain muscle on or off, it's going to try to do that, right? Our brain is something that is always trying to take the easy way out. Okay. So in that sense, if we look at your breathing patterns, right, the easiest pathway to breathing for everybody biologically and anatomically is through your left ab wall. And the reason why that is multifunctional. There's a difference in the way your diaphragm connects on the left and the right, but there's also more room for displacement on the left than the right internally. So when your lungs expand, right, that displaces air and pressure within your chest and stomach cavity. So all of that air and pressure has to go somewhere. Because we have more organs by volume on the right side of your body, there is less internal space on the right side for that expansion. There's more space on the left side for that expansion and contraction. So it's easier for your body to breathe through the left side of your chest and your stomach than it is through the right side.
Yeah, if you can sleep on your left side too, that helps as well.
There's a bunch of stuff that'll help with this, but the idea is that because it's easier for your body to operate on one side than the other for the capacity of breathing, your body frequently will try to keep the muscles on the left side of your body off. Because by keeping those muscles off, it opens up and maintains this pathway to breathing. So somebody who is in a controlled setting may be able to use their core, especially if we're cueing them to do so, and they'll be able to go through their patterns. But for that person, if neurologically their brain is always intent on keeping certain muscles off, like the left ab wall, because that's the pathway to breathing, as soon as you take your attention off that, that left ab wall is going to get shut off, so that the body can re-enter that pattern of breathing. If that is a reality for a goaltender, and by the way, this is a pattern that is true of about 65 to 70% of humans based on research. If that is somebody's neurological pattern, when they get on the ice, their body is naturally going to shut off their core on that left side. And now we have a cascading effect of the body trying to compensate around the lack of core engagement on the left. And again, now we get into this long cycle of compensation. But that's a good example of how your autonomic nervous system can create a pattern that then dictates how your body is going to operate as soon as you go into a reactive state.
And I'm guessing, like, if it's true of 65%, obviously a huge percentage of the population, that if we did research, we might, who knows, find that goalies that have success at the highest level aren't part of that 65% because they're not turning it off automatically.
Well, I would say yes, but what terrifies me is that I have found no correlation between efficiency and level of play in goaltending. So I look at a player in high school and I see inefficiency and I see instability. And I look at a player who's playing professional hockey and I see a lot of the same patterns. But the professional hockey player is stronger. They've developed a better compensation. They can work around these problems. But to assume that just because a player is playing at a higher level that they don't have these issues would be entirely incorrect. So that's how I went into this, but that the data has shown otherwise.
Interesting. And so they're succeeding, compensating, but at the end of the day, ultimately, more compensation leads to more injury risk. So if we can eliminate that compensation at an earlier age, we're going to reduce injuries. And there's probably some things, my guess from the outside would be, there are probably some things you identify that are like, hey, this is going to lead to an injury and this is an easy fix. And there might be other things in there that are like, hey, this might hurt you when you're 50, but it's so innate in your movement that we're just like you do you. Like, is that probably, again, over generalizing, but
yeah, I would say that's a red flag versus yellow flag, right? Like when I'm looking at movement patterns, you get a green check mark if I'm looking at this and saying this isn't going to affect anything that we're trying to do functionally. If I'm looking at something that's like, yeah, this could affect this, but it's not at the top of the priority, right? You get a yellow flag. If I'm seeing something, I'm like, no, this 100% is going to affect how you're going to play the position, and it's a red flag. So yeah, there's different levels in terms of both what the compensation is and the magnitude of the compensation, not to mention force, right? The most deadly thing we see is somebody who can create a lot of force but doesn't have a lot of stability, right? If you're a goaltender who is really fast and create all this force and you're really quick going side to side, but you lack stability, that's a recipe for disaster. So these are things that, you know, as much as we want to help professional goalies and collegiate goalies and these high level players, Rob and I both got into this to help kids, right? We got into this because I wanted to prevent the next goalie from becoming me, right? All I wanted to do was play this game. All I want to do now is go put my pads on and go play, but I can't play men's league because I spent the first 20 years of my life tearing my body apart. Right. I want people to be able to play this game and enjoy this game and be able to then go enjoy life and not have to live with the consequences and the realities of injuries that, quite frankly, are kind of simple to resolve once you understand and can assess them. It's the inability to assess these things that leads to the lack of understanding, and it leads to the misdiagnosis. And I think for us, if we could intervene at a younger age with these kids and teach kids from an early age some of these basic principles, then you could affect an entire generation of athletes in a positive way. And that's really what we're trying to do. I'm not we're not trying to become, professional goaltending coach. Like, as much as that's fun and cool to work with professional athletes, the real purpose would be affecting the next generation and being able to lead the goaltending world in a direction that takes us away from the inevitability and this, oh yeah, you're a goalie, you're going to have hip surgery, the same way that, oh, you're a pitcher, yeah, you're going to have Tommy John. Like, at what point can we accept that there are actual solutions to this and start applying this in an everyday world? And I think that's what our mission is. And if there's a frustration for Rob and I, it's been the lack of acceptance to that in the goaltending world. And that too many people are worried about, the performance aspects and trying to chase, speed and strength and all this other stuff. And nobody's looking at these underlying issues and addressing these things when they should be.
Are there
or also too trying to find the corrective actions as well to that, right? There's the whole piece here with the assessment, and some of the coaches we've talked to in the past are like, well, what if it shows I'm doing something wrong? And we're like, no, our approach isn't that you're doing anything wrong. Every kid there's going to be differences, as Casey pointed out, with every kid, right? And what we're trying to find is, all right, let's make this respective kid the best and healthiest athlete that they can be, right? That's really our mission at the end of the day.
Long term too. So are there generalities that apply? As much as it's individualistic, and in a perfect world, the assessment will unlock that and show you where you need to focus to have that long, healthy life as a goaltender. Are there some general things that we need to be doing differently that can be applied more broadly? Or does it really, are we in that assessment is so crucial to understanding? Because as we've said, like, there's no one way to do this. Goalies are so unique in terms of how they play, maybe in part because they're so unique with the underlying biomechanics they bring.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the generalities are that you want to create stability in the sagittal plane and you want to mobilize the frontal plane, right? That's kind of the guide forward. That's what your compass should be pointed to. That's really general. There's a lot of training that can be applied to that principle, right? But again, if you're looking at like what should I be doing off the ice to support this type of thing, there's a whole off ice component where everything you're doing from a workout standpoint should be about building sagittal stability. You should be able to go to any functional trainer and say, I need sagittal stability, and they should know what that means, right? You should be able to build frontal plane mobility. Like, that's language that any trainer should be able to acquire. And if you're asking for like the blueprint fundamental, if I could gift every single goaltender something, I would gift them sagittal stability and frontal plane mobility. And then that goaltender would come to me with the best possible vehicle to do what I'm going to ask them to do and to meet the needs of goaltending. Right. And so I look at like golf has an equation, right? If you're a golfer, you want to build your body to meet these needs. As a goaltender, you need sagittal stability and your frontal plane mobility. Like, that's what you need. And those are the ingredients that you should be trying to build. Everything beyond that, it gets into that subjective nature, but that's the foundation of movement that I would be trying to build if I was a goaltender at any age.
Now onto the assessment and the more specifics. And because I think like the reality is, as much as you're trying to help everyone at a young age, assessment is more likely to occur as they rise up the ranks. Hopefully not too late. Mm-hmm. What does an assessment look like? What like how long do you need to have them in the sensors to sort of get the information you need to help them solve these problems? Like, there's two parts of my brain. There's one that's going like, why isn't every NHL team doing this with every goalie they draft? And then there's the other part that's like, is it too late? Like, how do we make this, like you said, for every goalie so that they can access it?
There's a couple levels of assessment that we have. We started off with this. We can take a body comp using a body composition scale just to kind of get an idea of structure. Then we can go on to, we have a wireless functional motor screen. So we can get basic movements there, right? To see, okay, this is how the body's constructed. How is it moving? And we put those, we can put those pieces together to kind of get that initial lower level, if you like. Those are our two low levels of technology. And then the third one morphs into what Casey's talking about in the wild. So we can take a look at an athlete over those three things. Some people, it's some of the groups we've talked to in the past. One of the trainers would say, "Oh, I want the body comp." And the other one says, "Well, I want the motion." And I'm like, okay, well, shouldn't you two be talking to each other, right? To see if you have a body comp and you go ahead and say, "Oh, I corrected all the imbalances, from a muscle perspective." But it's like, yeah, but they're still manifesting themselves in a movement pattern, right? So, that's part of the part of our assessment as well, is to kind of say, hey, here's something that this can be a good basic start, right? To get a good look here. And then when you put all the pads on, because the equipment's going to dictate what you have as well, too. Kids oftentimes too, when they come in and they say, "Oh, I've got new pants." Okay, you're going to move a little differently. Your muscles are going to tire differently. You're going to feel a little warmer. I've got a new chest protector, right? So a number of those different things are getting back to what Casey's talking with the central nervous system, it's running through saying, "Oh, what's this? What am I supposed to be doing here? Oh, I'm doing this. Hold on. I got to process this information now." Right. So sometimes when the nervous system isn't mature, that's when you see that kind of learning curve pattern come in, when you are getting new equipment and things. And what I see a number of times is parents will say, "Oh, I'm going to get these pads so they can grow into it." And you see this little kid trying to push these wide pads around. And I'm like, oh God, okay. You just see the pads are kind of going up and then they'll drop down. The legs will go out a little more to try to compensate for everything. And you're like, okay, this is going to be a problem here. Or you see a glove that's too heavy, but it's bought because it's bigger. And you see them, it looks like they're trying to pick up a 10-pound rock, right? Trying to move it. So, those are some of the things here we can kind of get down to the nitty-gritty. And one of the things that we had looked at, we had partnered with some junior leagues a couple years back as well to do, motion capture assessment on their players. And, we ended up watching like 250 games over the course of a year, just watching respective players that we'd capture data on. And, we can get a decent read on some players. For fact, when we were testing out in one of the groups in the Midwest, we were doing our second level of technology. The evaluators came up to me and said, "Hey, what can you tell me about this kid?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "Let me take a look." And it was a skater. And I said, "Okay, they have trouble going to their right, can't make more than about a 15, 18-foot pass, and they don't like contact." And they kind of looked at me and we were like, "Wow, okay, you got that?" Yeah, we kind of get that out of a report because we've been doing this for quite some time. Or even with some of the lower level reports we look at and we say, "All right, you see a kid here and okay, look, I say, okay, you shoot right-handed." "Yes, I do." "Okay, so if the goalie's set up like this, most of your shots go, across your body, correct?" They're like, "Yeah." I said, "You're doing that because your legs aren't strong enough to support your upper body right now." And we show that we can see that out of our body comp, right? With the way that it affects everything. And I said, "So if I'm going to defend you, I'm just going to push you to the side and you're never going to get a good angle shot. It's easy to take you out of your game right now, right?" So we have a good understanding of any of the sports that we're involved with this. And, so that's been kind of a little bit of the discovery for us too, in that sense, in that, okay, if we are able to find this with players, and one more anecdote we were talking about, it was a professional player that we had tested, and, he came out and we said, the skating test is going to be very quick, and he was warming up for an insane amount of time. We're like, "No, you'll be okay. It's not like, we're not going to put you through a massive test here." And, just chatting with him. And I looked and I said, "Let me see your story." He was a very successful player in college. And I said, "But, you have a lot of injuries and you're young." I said, "You want one more year in the game, right? To retire on your own rules. But you still want to be able to play with your kids when you're 40. Is that right?" He goes, "Yeah, that's pretty much my life. That's what I want." So from that perspective, that's some of the other stuff that we try to bring in. But to your point, Kevin, and I've talked to, Steve Thompson about it as well, with respect to just the general sedentary nature of the kids today, right? They get up, they wake up, they go to school, they're sitting, they've got the, screen posture, as we call it, right? They're doing that. They get in the car, they finish school, they get in the car, they go home, they chill for a little bit. And let's say they drive an hour to practice. They get to practice. They're not getting there an hour before to warm up. They're getting there 10 minutes before because everybody's schedule. They don't really have time to stretch or do anything properly to warm up. they get on the ice. What's the first drills? 2 on O's, 3 on O's, move the puck around, get everything going. So the kid's sitting there moving all around, right? Getting everything all stirred up. And then they finish late after practice. And what do the parents say? Come on, we got to go home. We got to go home, right? So they're getting in the car, no real cool down. Get in the car, lactic acid builds up again. They get home. Oh, I'm so tired. Boom, go to bed, and you just start the whole sequence again. So there's inherently just a lot of daily processes in general, and that's part of the thing that we're working to try to correct, is not only during the hockey piece, but realize that, it's like kind of taking a test, but you got to study for the test and you got to prepare for the test. And that preparation for the test and studying for the test is what's done on the outside hours of the time that you're actually on the ice in your equipment. Does that all make sense?
It totally this all makes so much sense that the other part of my brain is like, why isn't everyone doing this? Like, and part of that answer may be that this is like still a developing technology for you guys, or a developing process. I know, like you said, you started just observationally. What does this look like, or what do you hope it looks like, or what could it look like, I guess, for teams that are like, hey, like, I'd like to know whether my goaltender is going to be injured in 3 years and or 3 months, and what I can do to minimize those risks.
Yeah, and that's been the difficult challenge with us. Hockey is a technologically challenged sport, shall we say, right?
Yeah, we're resistant to change, for sure.
Absolutely. And we've tested, at the highest levels, players at the highest levels. And it's funny in that, for example, I'm going to a baseball training house later this week. And we've got a number of Division I college athletes all lined up, ready to go, right? From that perspective. So part of it's been the adopting of it, right? And, our thing is that we're different than some of the other technology out there. There's a lot of player tracking. There's a lot of player load, right?
Right.
So, people, a lot of the, I guess the trainers out there, we're still trying to get our message across, right? To say, hey, this is, some of the data that we can collect. We've talked to a couple groups, and we had mentioned a pelvic sensor. I want to keep the names out of it, but, it's a high level group. And we said, we have a pelvic sensor. Like, you have a pelvic sensor? Wow. We're only using stuff on the foot. And to come back to kind of your, what we had spoke about earlier, some of the skating folks we've talked to, they're all worried about ankle bend, right? Ankle and knee bend. And we're like, okay, it comes from the pelvis. Yeah, but we want to know about the ankle and the knee bend. It's like, okay, that originates from the pelvis. That's a reaction to what's going on in the pelvis. Yeah, we want to know about the ankle and knee bend. Okay, so right. Part of it is just getting that change of thinking, thinking coming around and getting there. So that's, but we really are starting to make some great headway. We've got some great lineups coming up in the beginning of the year this year. But I think, Casey, if you're still there, I'd like to chime in with respect to some of the central nervous system work that he's doing with some of the newer technology that he's got out in his area there.
Yeah. So obviously there's this whole physical aspect that we've got into, and there's this whole biomechanical piece to everything that we're looking at through assessment. The step that we've taken beyond the biomechanical is into the neuromechanics, right? It's into, like we were talking about, how that nervous system is influencing the body. We have a couple of different technologies that we've started to utilize that give us the ability to take deep level assessment of the nervous system. So things that are really important relative to the nervous system for performance are things like brainwave activity and how your vital forces are, and these other types of metrics that measure how prepared your nervous system is to perform or to react or to create speed, all these different things. So again, we've dealt with athletes in the past who maybe check the boxes biomechanically, but still aren't translating. They're still not being able to learn at the rate that we want them to learn. And that's really what kind of kicked us into this neurological assessment. And so now we're using technologies as part of the assessment, not only to look at the functional movement screens and what's going on the ice, but also what's going on at the neurological level. And what we're able to find at the neurological level are blockages in brainwave activity. One of the more alarming things that we're finding through research is the correlation of the brain getting stuck in a state of fight or flight. So your brain is supposed to be able to move fluidly between the different stages of the nervous system. And that movement between the different stages of the nervous system is supposed to support your ability to do a host of different things. And one of the features of your brain is fight or flight. What we're seeing in research is that our interaction with technology is driving the brain deeper into this state of fight or flight, and it's actually removing the capacity for the brain to move freely into these other stages of the nervous system. And so when we have an athlete come in and we do an assessment on them and we get the nervous system assessment and we can see that their brainwave activity is 85% delta, then we know that their brain is stuck in a state of fight or flight. That athlete's going to struggle sleeping. They're going to struggle recovering. They're going to struggle focusing. That athlete is living in a state of fight or flight with the inability to remove themselves from it. And this is all tied from a research standpoint back to our interaction with technology, as I mentioned. And so you've got athletes like myself who grew up running through the woods and playing in rivers and climbing trees, and that's great. We developed an inherent and innate capacity to move between these different systems of the nervous system. Well, what we're seeing with today's athletes are they aren't developing that same capacity at the nervous system level, and they're getting stuck and living in this constant state of fight or flight. And that has a lot of ramifications on the social, emotional, just the mental health, well-being side of it. But there's also a component that ties back into performance. And I have an athlete in front of me who is completely in a state of fight or flight. That athlete is not going to be able to translate the knowledge that I'm giving them and turn that into movement. And furthermore, even if they can in that state, their body's not committing that to memory because they don't have the type of brain wave activation that is required for that to actually take place. And so we've started looking at athletes not just from the biomechanical perspective, but also from the neuromechanics perspective to understand even more upstream the influences that are being had on this athlete and how we can influence those things and unlock this flow of energy from the nervous system and allow athletes to exist in a state of being calmer and more focused. So that's kind of been an unlocking mechanism for us that we've just started to do as well.
Well, really touching on all aspects of human performance.
Trying to leave no stone unturned, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to take objective measure in all states. So now we're taking objective measurement of the nervous system, again, of functional movement, body composition, and biomechanical data at the highest level. So we're trying to create as much of this objective data so we can make good decisions and create the best type of blueprint and roadmap forward for an athlete. I think it's multifaceted. There's a lot of different elements to it, but that's also what is necessary if we really want to start to understand what's truly causing the things that we're seeing in goaltending.
Wow.
We also do a nutritional and mental assessment as well too. That's on the digital base. So we kind of really look to tie everything together just to make sure that athlete's there. And as Casey mentioned about a blueprint, every athlete that we work with gets their own individual blueprint that's delivered to them. And now it's up to the respective kids at that point to continue the work that we've given them.
So I've got my head is spinning a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. No PhDs here. But so much. I can't thank you guys enough for your time. Like, we've been at this for an hour and I've taken up more than I said I would. But I've learned so much. My question now is sort of like, if somebody else, we have a lot of goalie coaches right up to the NHL that listen to this podcast, wants to learn more about this, how do they go about, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys about what this is all about and learn more and hopefully bring it in to help more goalies stay healthy longer and hey, we'll give the skaters a chance.
Okay, great. Well, I think the best way is just to reach out via email, and that's sportsciencesolutions@gmail.com. Okay. And that's the best way, or you can go to our website, sportsciencesolutions.us. And then Casey's number's there, my number's there, and I'll be more than happy to chat. I think one of those goalie chat rooms that we got into, I think that's how you discovered us there, where a number of goalie coaches were like, "Hey, we want to talk more about this." So we're trying to find something here to put together just to get our message out there a little more. Hopefully a podcast or something like that through just a group where we can collectively share with everybody too, what we're finding, because it definitely is next level. There's nothing out there like this. And it's funny, you'll see, and Casey and I often talk about it. You just see on social media, just a number of things, and people will say, "Oh, I got this routine on, off of this, from this respective coach. And I said, okay, do you have the same tissue structure? Do you have the same, are you built the same way? Is this really what's going to be best for you?
Well,
Do you know that?
InGoal magazine, we present a lot of different things. Like that's kind of what we do, try and find as many different voices and present it. And we always describe it as, hey, like we're not telling you what to do, but here are tools you can put in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
You decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to leave. I think what you guys are doing is identifying how everybody's toolbox is shaped.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So listen, I can't thank you enough. I'm hoping this is the first of many conversations. You've piqued my interest in so many different ways. And this is a chance, I appreciate you guys taking this chance to sort of share what you're doing with me. I'm glad we connected Rob through. It was one of the USA Hockey chat groups. And I just think my hunch is you're going to be hearing from a lot more goalies after this conversation, after we publish it on the InGoal Radio podcast. So thank you so much for your time, and keep up the great work.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure. I really want to thank you for having us on here. And that was our mission. When I remember when Casey called me, he's like, "Hey, I have this golf software I think can help with goalie hips." We said, "Okay, let's try it out." Right? And I just got to bring up I remember one of the first goalies we tested. Remember, Casey, we had the little like Bluetooth with a little pigtail, and the little Bluetooth was right there. We're like, all right, whatever you do not hit that Bluetooth. That's going to screw up all the data. It was like a little pigtail thing that came out with a USB connector. We're like, you can't hit this without what you're doing. So it's been quite a journey. But Casey, I'll let you, whatever you want to say here in closing, feel free.
No, I appreciate it. Kevin, thank you for your time. I mean, I think for Rob and I, it's just, the opportunity to talk about this stuff is important. We really care about, trying to share this information and share what we've been able to learn, because I think there's a lot of stuff here that could really positively shape, the goaltending world moving forward.
Well, and when you talk about wanting to just help young goalies, I know obviously anecdotally, I know as a goalie, every goalie knows what you're talking about in terms of not, knowing that one day you won't be able to do the thing you love because of the way it's treated your body, but also having that the background in golf on the PGA teaching side. I know it's a passion on goaltending because comparatively, there are a whole lot more golfers and a whole lot more money to be made on the golf side than there is in goaltending. So this comes from the heart. I know, Casey. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, it's our pleasure, and look forward to many more conversations.
Okay, I have to make one admission here as I was listening to you guys talk. I didn't realize there's more space on the left side of my body, like the rib cage, than there is on the right. I always thought it would be the opposite.
Okay, so now here's a question for you, Darren. As he was doing that, as he was explaining that, did you find yourself trying to feel it in your breath?
Yes, because I was listening to it while I was on the bike, and I was like, "How does this work?" Because the heart is over there. I thought that would take up more space, and I was totally wrong. So that,
and when you do it, you can sort of feel it, can't you?
Yes.
Or maybe that's all in our head, but you start to I was doing it as he was talking about. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right. Like I don't know if that's real or imagined, but placebo effect. But 100%, it's
that had nothing to do with the real impact of the conversation, except I was, like I said, going into the interview, like visualize your body and your hips, because how is that possible? My heart's over here, but I guess spleen.
There's a whole bunch of other stuff on the other side. It's pretty important too. Some of us may have lost one of the key ones over there to a slap shot years ago. The whole appendix. Maybe I've got more room on my right.
So now
side
you're even. You're balanced.
Yeah, exactly. I balanced it out.
That was fun. I do think that is going to make its way to National Hockey League teams. That discussion that just took place.
Yeah, and like I said, like when you look at what they're doing and you get a glimpse, a little behind the scenes stuff at some of the things they've uncovered. To be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't already. But hey, it's a league that can be a little slow to adapt.
Injuries, players, goalies, like be able to look at that, the strength and conditioning coaches, that would be invaluable.
Well, even I'm like, I feel like we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. Even the stuff about T-pushes relative to butterfly drops.
And I do that.
And like that hard kick out heel stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you and I are generating enough velocity at this age to,
No, but
to cause the sheer effect, Darren.
I try to be fast for that push out to try and get myself like engaged in the rush that's coming down.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to do it anymore. I'm going to be less engaged. I don't have to be asked twice.
Darren, let it come to you. Just sit back and let it come to you, okay? And if anybody asks, as you say, listen, I'm letting it come. I'm letting it come.
You know what I do now?
And I'm saving my hips.
Here's my new philosophy on playing. I treat every rush like a golf hole. I try and make a birdie on it or a par, but I don't want to make a bogey. And so there's pressure in the zone. There's an opportunity. And I try to make the save on it, and I judge myself that way. And I play it to par and see what I am to par throughout the game.
Okay, so now I got to ask. So are we talking like rushes, like guys flying down the wing, like the odd man stuff we see in practices?
Chances against, like every zone.
Every time it's in the
possession.
Zone.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were talking about pushing out hard and coming back with a rush, like we don't do that anymore, Darren. We stay in our crease and
we
wait for it a bit.
It's just helping me try to keep it in perspective, and then not letting one, like golf. You don't want to let a bogey carry over into the next hole. So if I make a bogey and I allow a goal, a not so great play.
See, now we need to get Casey back on because he's a top PGA instructor. And he gets into the, we talked about the neurology, the sort of neuropsychological side of it and the neuromechanics as well as the biomechanics. So I didn't want to ask him about my golf swing because I was afraid that if he ever saw that, he never talked to us again. So I'll leave it to you to take the golf conversation with him in the next episode.
As lame of a golfer I am, it's still better than him messing around with my goaltending. That was fun today. That was great.
It was good stuff. So thanks to those guys for spending all that time.
Have fun with all this. Yeah, and those guys were amazing. And I love the way they played off each other.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Great stuff. And like I said, we'll try and follow up on this. If you've got questions, we'll put the address to Sports Science Solutions in the show notes, but you can always reach out to us.
Let us know what you think of that conversation. I'm really interested to hear people's interpretation of your discussion.
And I'm like you said, Darren, I'm kind of expecting a few text messages from guys around the league for follow-ups as well after this one. I don't know why you wouldn't want to know more if you're a goalie director, goalie coach, goalie person in the NHL.
If you don't, there's something wrong. Right? Like just from basic curiosity.
Yeah, we're a slow adapting league when it comes to modern stuff. Let's be honest.
Well, somebody's going to get ahead of the game on this. Great job. Thanks to everybody for taking part in this conversation and being a great supporter of InGoal Radio, the podcast from the Hockey Shop to Vizual Edge, Stop It Goaltending U, and NHL Sense Arena. It's a great privilege to be part of this journey of goaltending. We'll talk to you next time on InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Langley, thehockeyshop.com.